Alrighty, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. I'm your host, Marine Kashif Gayas. Welcome to Paths to Publication. We're so excited to have Dr. Phillis George with us today. For those who are new to Paths to Publication, this is a virtual event hosted by the Center for Research and Development in Dual Language and Literacy Acquisition, the ELRC Education Outreach, and the Graduate Student Advisory Council, guiding on everything that graduates need to know regarding writing, research, theory, publication, grants, and the graduate experience overall. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll certainly discuss them towards the end of this discussion. I would now like to introduce our wonderful speaker, Dr. Phillis George.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I hope that you all can hear me. I
So sorry, Dr. George, I would still like to say a few words
I'm so
to,
sorry.
no, fantastic. I need to let our wonderful guests know about some of your contributions.
Go
And
ahead. My
I'm still
apologies.
admitting more people. Um, Okay, so Dr. George is a higher education scholar practitioner with a rich background in academic and student affairs administration, with an earned doctorate in educational leadership and policy analysis from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as masters in sociology from University of Oxford. She conducts focused research on social justice and policy issues broadly related to access, affordability, and some very important themes. She also teaches a variety of graduate courses, including college teaching, organization and governance, recent developments in educational practice, advanced methods of applied research, and advanced education policy analysis. Dr. George is an American Council on Education Fellow and currently serves as chair of the Department of Higher Education within the School of Education at Mississippi's flagship institution, the University of Mississippi. With that, and without further ado, let's move on to hear from Dr. George. Over to you.
Well, now, good morning. And my apologies for interrupting. I was just a little too eager.
Not at all.
And I will share again that I'm so excited to be here and to join you all, albeit virtually. I really do appreciate the opportunity to just share a bit about the work that I'm doing um, in my current role. And I am going to ask, is it possible for me to share my screen so that I can share the PowerPoint?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. As I'm pulling up my PowerPoint, what I will share is about 2 to 3 years ago, I really got an idea in my head that I just couldn't let go of. And it was an idea that was focused and it stemmed from my own experiences and observations as a minoritized faculty member at the University of Mississippi, and also observations of other minoritized faculty members at other predominantly white institutions, specifically within the Deep South. And so I decided I wanted to do something about it. And I knew that I wasn't the first person that had, had this idea, but I wanted to go about it a little differently. It was the heart of COVID. I got tired of just sitting around in my home, quarantined like all of us were. And I decided that I was going to apply for a very prestigious uh, fellowship in higher education, known as the American Council on Education Fellows Program, or ACE Fellows. And many of you are probably very familiar with this fellowship program. What it enabled me to do was to travel for a year to a host institution. My host institution was Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And I chose that institution because of the project that I wanted to pursue. The project was focused on finding ways to sustain ways to diversify the faculty at a predominantly white institution in a rural setting And if you've ever traveled to Oxford, Mississippi, or to Ithaca, New York, you'll note that we have one thing in common. We are both located in remote areas. I also chose Cornell because it is an R1. It holds the unique distinction of being a public and a private institution. It's a public land grant. It's a very unique, it was a very unique selection. And so I considered myself to be very fortunate to have had an opportunity to go and just shadow members of their president and provost office. And while there, I wanted to learn everything I could about how they supported diverse faculty, how they recruited, how they retained. But not only them, I spent the year traveling to other institutions within the Deep South and outside of the Deep South and learning about how they did the same. And so what I came back with after that year was a renewed sense of faith that this was something that could be done if we just put forth a little bit of strategic institutional effort. And it started with data. It starts and ends with knowing what you look like as an institution, what your goals are for diversifying your faculty, and what resources, supports, infrastructure you have in place and need to put in place to do the work. And so that's really what my presentation is focused on. I'm going to try and share my screen. I've been clicking the share screen button, but I can't seem to share it. It keeps saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
Dr. George, let me just quickly make sure.
And what I can do is email you, and
I think you can. You should be
okay, I
able to
can
share
do
it
it now. Okay. Yes, I can. There we are.
Great. Sorry about that.
No worries. Let me put this in PowerPoint slideshow. Are you all able to see?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. So the title of my presentation is just broadening the pipeline to the professoriate, because that is really the goal. I've sort of already set it up and given you the background. This was a project that started during COVID for me. Today, I'm going to share with you portions of this project. It will not cover the entire SEC, as it's still an active and ongoing project. I have a full research team that's working with me on this, combing through the data, doing open records requests so that we can really dive deep and see what's really going on. But I started, I have a few introductory slides with which I'll just share with you. Much of our work in higher education is really devoted around serving the population. And we all know that America and the world, indeed, it's changing. It is changing. And if I can be very frank, it's changing in the best of ways. We are becoming a very diverse nation. And that diversity is reflected across the globe. But higher education has to do the work so that we can serve increasingly more and more diverse students that come into our campuses. And this includes colleges and universities of all types and sizes, 2-year, 4-year, public and private, minority serving institutions, and predominantly white institutions. You know, I'm of the mindset that predominantly white institutions probably have a lot of work to do compared to some of the other institutions that I've just shared, because they are predominantly white. And what I wanted to know specifically was, for those PWIs that are located in regions of our nation where there happen to be outside of the institutional walls and settings a large number of Black and Brown citizens, I wanted to know what those institutions could do to diversify their faculty ranks, because presumably, you know, it should be easy for them, or so I thought. So I thought. Um, so I'm being very transparent with you here, but that really this is really what I wanted to learn and know more about. So a critical and worthwhile question that I asked myself and that I'm constantly asking my team is how can PWIs, particularly in the Deep South, overcome these challenges related to the need to diversify their faculty? So as I pondered this question, I went down sort of a rabbit hole. I first thought maybe I'll just look at three specific states in the U.S. Southeast, three contiguous states, and that's Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. But I thought that's an obvious selection. Let's expand upon that. How can I build that out and get broader diversity? The U.S. Southeast is not a monolith, and there's a lot of diversity represented there. And so I began to think about the Southern University Group, and I thought, oh, well, what are my other options? And of course, there's the Southern Regional Education Board, and both of those would have been fine options. For many of you that are familiar with these groups, you know that there's great overlap across the list of institutions that are included. But ultimately, where I landed was an athletic conference, which I know is a strange selection. Um, but the SEC, apart from it being, in my opinion, one of the finest athletic conferences in the nation, we do tailgating very well, and we know how to trash talk very well. So I think that that's why not? You can have fun with the project, but also, as I've already alluded, SEC institutions by and large are located in regions where there are just larger numbers of racial and ethnic minorities, and specifically African Americans. Um, there are, as you know, 16 institutions represented within the SEC across 12 states. This includes public flagships, public land grant institutions, and one private institution. For those of you that are not as familiar with the SEC and its history, I just kind of wanted to highlight some things for you. It began in 1933 with 13 members, and as of July 1, 2024, we have 16 members. Now, I have not highlighted Oklahoma and the University of Texas for two reasons, because they just got added as of this year. Um, and so the landscape is changing. I believe that there will be more institutions added to this list. But what is most important about today's conversation is that each of these institutions are located regionally in an area where there are greater numbers of racial and ethnic minorities. And so the work presumably should be easier, but we know it's not as cut and dry as that. So, with that said, today I really wanted to target one institution in particular and use it as an exemplar to show you how me and my team are going about drilling into the data. A lot of times when universities report the data in terms of their numbers of any demographic effect of faculty, but most especially of Black faculty and other racial and ethnic faculty groups. They do it in the aggregate, but the challenge for me there is you're able to hide some things. You're not able to get a composite portrait of really what's going on within an institution. And as I shared earlier, my time at Cornell taught me how to drill deep into the data to figure out where the problem areas are and what the institution can do to address those areas. And so when I came back to the University of Mississippi, my chancellor charged me with doing just that, drilling down into the data. And so I'm going to speak with you for the next 15 minutes or so. And I just wanted to walk you through how we are drilling into our data. And we're doing the same for each of the 15 other SEC institutions. And so far, I am happy to share everyone's been extremely supportive and cooperative and collaborative in terms of sharing their data. Really haven't had to do too many open records requests. People are wanting to see these numbers specifically for Black and Brown faculty increase. And more importantly, they're wanting strategies. They're wanting to know strategies that can help. And so in collaboration with our Chief Diversity Officer and other Chief Diversity Officers across the SEC and representatives from Provost's offices across the SEC, I've been able to pull the very same data that I'm about to share with you for just about all of the SEC institutions. So the first bit of data that I wanted to share is so that you can get an idea of who we are as an institution is I'm giving you data that represents the past 10 years by tenure and academic rank. And this is all IPEDS data. And this is full and part-time. This is meaningful because in Mississippi, for Ole Miss, when we report our faculty data, the numbers are always inclusive of full and part-time. This has meaning because if you're counting part-time faculty of color, it does not tell you the whole story. Again, so this is us trying to drill down deeper into the data. But what you see before you is a 10-year representation dating all the way back to 2013. What I'd like to point your attention to is in 2013, the total of Tenure-Track, and the disclaimer here, Tenure-Track for the University of Mississippi includes faculty members who are tenured, as well as those currently seeking tenure. So it is all inclusive. But in 2013, we had 543 Tenure-Track faculty, and obviously that only applies to faculty at the ranks of assistant, associate, and full professor. In 2023, we only increased that number slightly to 567. We experienced more growth in our non-tenure track faculty ranks, which is not surprising. This tracks with the research and the data that I've seen across all of the SEC institutions. We moved from 437 non-tenure eligible faculty in 2013 to 571 in 2023. Now, this includes all faculty, majority faculty, minority faculty, full and part-time. So in essence, we increased our workforce from 2013, which totaled 980 to 1138 in 2023. And these numbers will have greater meaning momentarily. Next, I want to just introduce to you full-time, which you've already seen, but it just breaks it down in a much more concentrated way. So in 2013, again, 543 tenure-track. Of that, 155 professors, 215 associate professors, 173 assistant professors. For me, this has meaning because we really wanted to know, not so much for the lecturers and the instructors, but more so for the assistant, associate, and full professors. We wanted to know what the numbers really looked like for full-time faculty. And we've seen a gradual incline, as I've already indicated, but I'm going to skip ahead to the African-American data so that you can have a quick comparison. So the African-American faculty by tenure and academic rank, full and part-time, from 2013 to 2023. Remember, we've just looked at the entire institution's 10-year evolution for full and part-time faculty. And now we're going to compare that with African-American faculty. This is an attempt to drill down and really get a composite portrait of where the institution has stood and where it stands today. So in 2013, we had 37 tenure-track Black faculty. and 22 non-tenure track. This compares to the count in 2023. We lost 6. We decreased to 31 tenure track faculty, and we more than doubled our reliance on non-tenure track Black faculty. We have 51. So what I want to say here is this trend right here is right on point with what we've seen represented for at least 60% of the other SEC institutions. Over the last 10 years, we've seen a gradual decline in their Black faculty in terms of full-time tenure track faculty, and we've seen a sharp increase in the number of Black full-time faculty who are not tenure eligible. Again, sharp increase in the number of full-time Black faculty who are not tenure eligible. So when you report the numbers, which the University of Mississippi and I've been collecting articles for many of the SEC institutions, when they report their numbers of Black faculty, they tend to combine the number of full-time tenure track and non-tenure track, and they'll give you this healthy, robust number. Ole Miss is a great example. We always share the number of 82 from 2023. Anytime we shared our faculty data, we have 82 Black faculty. And that's misrepresenting. In fact, last year, we had 31 tenure track full-time Black faculty. 21 of them were tenured, and 10 of them were seeking tenure. So that means that's an institutional window of opportunity. We can, by drilling down this deep into the data, we can identify those 10 Black faculty members who are seeking tenure, and we can wrap around them, right? And the question is, are we? Are we? The research project and my research team, in addition to looking at the numbers, we're also looking at the infrastructure, the institutional infrastructures that SEC schools have to support faculty at every stage of their progression. One of the things that I was surprised to learn is that unless someone goes the extra mile to identify who these folks are, at any given time, we don't know who they are. And that's a problem. If we're focused on retention of Black faculty and increasing the numbers and ensuring that they progress and are promoted in a timely manner, we should be able to answer that question. Which Black faculty are coming up for tenure and promotion? How can we help them? What have we been doing to help them? This was a vulnerability for our institution. It is a vulnerability for many SEC institutions, I'm learning. I'm going to keep going here, and I want to come back because this is a major talking point that I hope that we can discuss during the Q&A. So a lot of this, I just wanted to, this is redundant, so I'm going to go to the next slide. So this next slide includes tenure track full-time Black faculty across departments, schools, and colleges. Remember, the goal was to drill down into the data to see literally what we have going on in terms of our institution's composite portrait around broadening participation in the professoriate. So the chancellor asked us to identify Black faculty right down to individual schools and colleges and departments. And those 31 tenure track Black faculty, 10 of which were still seeking tenure last academic year, here's where they are represented within the schools and colleges and individual departments of the University of Mississippi. You'll see for many units, there's only one. And that shouldn't be. I can tell you that this data trend was also duplicated across many of the SEC institutions. One. This is an institutional vulnerability. and we have to do more to address it. So one of the things that I am adamant about is while we're talking about full-time tenure track faculty, I also wanted to know what the picture looked like for non-tenure track full-time faculty. And so for the University of Mississippi, again, drilling deep into the data, these are our numbers from last year, the 2023-2024 academic year. And it's not so different from our data for the full-time tenure track Black faculty. There were 25 non-tenure eligible Black faculty last year, and many of them are the only one within their respective units. Again, an institutional vulnerability. Now, this data point for the University of Mississippi was not in alignment with the trend that I saw that we're seeing rather for other SEC institutions. Remember, I said largely across the SEC, we've seen an uptick in the number of Black faculty who are in full-time, non-tenure eligible positions. And many of them are in units where they are not the only one. So we are seeing greater critical mass among our non-tenure track faculty ranks right down to the departmental level in general across the SEC. But the data that is before you is specific to the University of Mississippi, and it tells a slightly different story, as many of our non-tenure track colleagues are still finding themselves in scenarios where they are the only one. So what that says about Ole Miss, quite honestly, is whether our Black faculty are in full-time tenure track roles or non-tenure track roles, we have work to do in terms of increasing our numbers and supporting faculty as we experience gains in those areas. So this is a summary, and again, all of this data comes from IPEDS. This was an intentional decision on my part because certainly institutions collect their own data and they do the reporting to IPEDS, but since we're looking at 16 different institutions, I wanted to have a standardized metric or set of metrics, and so IPEDS data is perfect. So for all of the institutions, we're looking at IPEDS data. This next slide, again, using IPEDS data, paints a very harrowing or tells a very harrowing tale, in my opinion. Again, this is a 10-year timeline from 2013 to 2023. What I did here was to give you the number of Black faculty, full-time tenure track African-American faculty as a percentage of full-time tenure track faculty. Again, at the University of Mississippi, when we say tenure track, we are including our tenured colleagues, in addition to those colleagues who are still seeking tenure. So this is a breakdown at the full professor rank, at the rank of associate professor, and at the rank of assistant professor. This slide here is a very important one because it models to you what our research team is doing for each of the SEC institutions in terms of really drilling down into the data. It shows us where the institution's vulnerabilities are and where their strengths are. For the University of Mississippi, for instance, if you look at the assistant professor count of African Americans, you've seen that we've experienced a steady decline from 2013 to 2023. In 2013, we had 13. In 2023, we have 8. Some of that decline can be explained by promotions, but some of that decline can also be explained because people voluntarily elected to go elsewhere. So the conversations that we are having as an institution right now is identifying what happened to those 13 African-American full-time tenure-track colleagues in 2013? And going name by name and seeking to identify what happened. Were they promoted? Are they still with us? If not, did they leave? Why did they leave? Let's go back and do an exit interview so that we can understand how we could have done things differently. So right now, we're actually about to hire a postdoc to help us with this work. The same with the associate professor ranks. We still experienced a slight decline, and much like with the assistant professors, some of this can be explained by promotion, but our preliminary investigations tell us that a lot of the fluctuation that we see at the associate professor level for full-time tenure-track Black faculty has to do with other institutions being able to steal the talent, for lack of better phrasing. And so the postdoc that we are hiring is going to help us, particularly with those colleagues who have left our institution and gone elsewhere, in terms of doing exit interviews, even if the exit rather was 9 or 10 years ago. We're that committed now to addressing this because we can't really develop a real plan until we understand what our vulnerabilities are. The data shares with us some portions of the portrait, but to paint a composite portrait, we need some qualitative data. And so the postdoc will help us fill in some of those gaps. You see at the full professor level, we've actually experienced a slight increase since 2013. We went from 6 African-American fully tenured full professors to 9. But there's been a lot of fluctuation up and down. Basically, if you're looking at this, we've just kind of coasted. We've really just kind of coasted. But what we would like to see is a sharp increase in these numbers, especially as a percent of the full-time tenure-track faculty. What we have learned based on some of our preliminary qualitative data is that we need more numbers so that folks can feel as if there is critical mass. And we are exploring some rather innovative strategies for achieving critical mass, and that even includes exploring options for extending to our non-tenure track colleagues, everyone, not just Black faculty, but all non-tenure track colleagues, an option, a one-time option to essentially switch to full-time if that is something that they desire. Full-time tenure track, if that is something that they desire. It's easier said than done. We're working with our HR colleagues and our general counsel office to see if this is something that we can pull off. But that is one of our lowest hanging fruit as an institution, to be able to really double our numbers of full-time tenure track Black faculty, but also other faculty. So with that said, I have one last slide, and then I'm anxious to just engage with you. These are the numbers from 2023, again, across schools and colleges for our tenure track colleagues and our non-tenure track colleagues. This is an important drill down, especially when I present this data to our Council of Deans and to our very invested alumni who are willing to support these institutional endeavors via philanthropic dollars. This is a very important slide, because those folks, I can tell you, all want to see their numbers go up. And the folks who don't have numbers by their respective units, they don't want to be there. They want to see their numbers increase as well. And so this does paint partially a portrait of the University of Mississippi and the work that we have to do to broaden participation in the professoriate here. You'll note that we do have a medical center, and none of this data includes data for the medical center. Although we carry the same name, for all intents and purposes, we operate as separate institutions. But these numbers do pertain directly to the Oxford campus, the main campus. You can see that the college or school that's in the lead, unsurprisingly, is the College of Liberal Arts. It is the first college that was a part of the University of Mississippi, and it is the largest college. But with that said, 16 is still a relatively low number, given the fact that it is our largest college and we have over 20,000 students. So I'm going to stop sharing here and just kind of open the floor up for questions and comments and ideas, suggestions even, because like I said, I have a research team of about 5, and we are working to cover the entire SEC. Where we are right now is we're developing a similar data profile for all SEC institutions. And we are also in the middle of updating that to add 2024 once all of those numbers are made official. If your institution is like my institution, the 2024 numbers are not released until November 1. That is considered our census date, and that's when we are able to access those data. So with that, I will say thank you for allowing me to share a bit about this research project and how we are how we're framing it and seek to replicate it across all SEC institutions. And listen, I'm open to suggestions because it's a massive project, but it's a worthwhile one, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Dr. George, for that wonderful presentation, really an eye-opener. And these are aspects that usually do get ignored. Maybe I'll start with a question, and then, of course, the floor is open. Feel free to type your question in the chat box, everyone. So basically, in your experience, what institutional barriers do you think contribute mostly towards the underrepresentation of diversity faculty members in tenure-track positions, and how could those barriers be quantified through data?
So I'll start with something that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. I had this natural assumption that because the SEC institutions were regionally, most of them located in the Deep South, an area where there are just larger numbers of racial and ethnic minorities, and especially African Americans, I thought that that was an easy barrier to overcome. But I was naive. I was very naive. In addition to being located regionally in the Deep South or in the South period, many of the SEC institutions also have to deal with a long-standing stigma related to the legacy of slavery and systemic racism and inequality. And it is not easy to overlook it. If you are trying to recruit diverse faculty, but most especially African American faculty, it's hard. It's hard to convince an African American faculty member at any stage in their career progression that an investment in your institution is a solid investment, given your institution's, quite frankly, racialized history. We at the University of Mississippi struggle with that. And we have to have a very frank conversation with ourselves and with the talent that we try to recruit. And I believe we've gotten really good at it, to be honest. We've become very transparent and honest about what our past challenges are, what our current challenges are, but also very real about what our hopes and aspirations for a future Ole Miss, what those are. And trying to speak in a convincing manner to those candidates, those faculty candidates, about why we think that they would be a great asset to our university community. Now, notice none of what I said had anything to do with data. It had everything to do with owning our story, owning our past, not shying away from it. In my observation so far, in looking at the institutional infrastructure and resources and supports and initiatives broadly across the SEC, some institutions have gotten real about being able to communicate that to diverse faculty, and others not so much. To me, that's a real barrier. If we can't have an open, honest, and transparent conversation, then that tells me we're not ready to really do the work to support diverse faculty, to help broaden the professoriate. And broadening the professoriate is about more than just data, what I just presented to you. It's about more, it's about using the data to identify opportunities, weaknesses, and then making informed decisions accordingly. One of the parallel studies that my team and I are doing is we're looking at the administrative and leadership ranks and their supportive centers, units, institutes that have the mission of faculty development. Because we see that as a strategy, as an opportunity to help complement the institution's efforts to increase the numbers. It's not just enough to increase the numbers. You also have to have some mechanisms in place to support people when they are here so that they can do their best work. And not so surprisingly, many institutions have developed those divisions of diversity. Those names have changed. Some institutions have had to dissolve those divisions altogether. But for those institutions that still have them, there are some opportunities there. For those institutions that don't have them, there are opportunities within offices of provosts in terms of faculty affairs and academic affairs. The large umbrella here is faculty development. So my team and I mentioned we've been working on this since COVID.
Wow.
So this landscape has changed drastically.
Absolutely. The
Oh, go
landscape,
ahead.
this definitely has changed. I sorry interrupted. We do have time for this one question that Nahid Rahman would like to ask. Nahid, please go ahead.
I'm sorry,
No,
I'm
of course.
long-winded.
Of course, it's also insightful. Over to you, Nahid.
Thank you, Dr. George, for your wonderful presentation. And actually, I'm not surprised about the numbers because this is also my work. I'm here at the University of Texas A&M University. I'm the Director of Assessment and Evaluation. And also, this is part of the issues that we are trying to find solutions to it, how to promote more faculty or how to sustain and retain our diverse or our Black faculty or the faculty from different groups. So can I share my screen? Can I share my screen, Irene?
All right, Nahid, maybe. So we actually don't have much time for that.
No, it will be just 1 second. I mean, it's
Okay.
not a big thing.
Okay.
It's just like,
Okay, there you go.
okay.
You have
So,
less than a minute.
okay, here it is. So this is, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the ethnicity trend of the faculty at Texas A&M, also during starting from fall 2018 till 2023. And as you see here is the Black or African American line. So this is for the whole university that have more than 80,000 students, that we have only 136 faculty who are African American. or Black. So I totally understand the problem. But the thing is, I believe there is an issue in the categories themselves because we have also faculty who are classified as white, but they are not. So, for example, if we look at the faculty who came from North Africa or even like Middle East, they are classified as white while they are not. So I myself like have this issue when I applied for faculty positions. It's like where I should put myself. I mean, I identify myself as Black, but I'm not. But it's kind of, but this is offset the ratio, or it offsets the numbers, because in many of the universities they have good number of um, faculty who are identified as white, but they are actually not. So, is there a way to fix this or to include? I mean, I don't know how can we fix it. Is it like a kind of internal policy at the university, or it is like the federal categorization should be changed? I don't know. So, what do you think?
So my colleagues and I actually have had this conversation, and I appreciate your comment. I truly do, because one of the things that we are striving to do is to annually push out a questionnaire for all of our faculty, full and part-time, whereby they can self-identify, not just for race or ethnicity, but for all types of identity indicators, how they identify. And that's a broader attempt to be more inclusive and intentional about elevating everyone within our work and learning community. And we haven't done it yet. We are going to be piloting that in the coming academic year, fingers crossed. But that's just one way. It's obviously it's not perfect because it's self-reported. But to date, we haven't done that. We haven't done that. And then you could compare with the IPEDS data, which is very limited in terms of how you can classify faculty.
All right, with that, there is so much more to say in this theme, and your presentation has been absolutely insightful and so useful for all of us, whether we're doctoral students or working. And of course, it's significant to track these developments through data and make sure that institutions and all of us in place of power should make sure that there is something being done about diversity, and we're institutionalizing it through a proper infrastructure. And this is really not an expenditure, is an investment. With that, I really wish we had an hour more, Dr. George, but we're certainly going to get you back on one of our forums. I really appreciate. Thank you everyone for joining in today, for your comments, feedback, and most of all, Dr. George, thanks to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Are you still recording?
1, 2,